What happens when the one person you trust more than anyone else betrays you in the worst way possible? A loving husband, a devoted wife, and a life built together until the truth comes crashing down. Secrets, lies, and betrayal are about to be revealed. This story will shock you to the core and leave you questioning everything about love and loyalty. Stay with us till the end, because you won't believe what happens next. This betrayal will change everything. Ava and Ethan had been married for 7 years, and to the outside world, they were the picture of happiness. Friends and family admired their bond, always talking about how perfect they seemed together. They were a team. Ava, the loving wife who supported Ethan through every challenge, and Ethan, the hard-working husband who adored his wife and did everything he could to make her happy. They had built a life full of shared memories, a home filled with laughter, and the promise of a future together. But that future was about to be shattered. Ava had always trusted Ethan implicitly. They had grown up together, dated through college, and married soon after graduation. They had known each other for so long that there was no room for doubt in her mind. She never questioned his loyalty or his love for her. But recently, she had noticed subtle changes, small things that seemed insignificant at first, but slowly began to add up. Ethan started working longer hours, coming home late from his job as a manager at a corporate firm. It wasn't unusual for him to stay late during a busy period, but the late nights became more frequent. And when he came home, he seemed distant, his mind always elsewhere. He was constantly on his phone, checking emails and responding to messages, but when Ava asked him about his day, he was vague, offering short, uninterested answers. At first, Ava brushed it off. She understood that work could be demanding. She even encouraged him to focus on his career, thinking it was just a temporary phase. But the emotional distance between them grew, and soon she found herself questioning their relationship. She had always trusted him, but now she felt a nagging unease that she couldn't shake off. One day, Ava's curiosity got the better of her. She had been feeling disconnected from Ethan, and that day something felt different. He was acting especially cold. After he left for work, Ava found herself wandering around the house, trying to distract herself. That's when she noticed something strange. His phone was lying on the kitchen counter, unattended. Normally, Ethan would have taken it with him, but today it was just sitting there. Her heart raced as she picked it up. She told herself she wasn't going to invade his privacy, but the temptation was too strong. She unlocked the phone, and as soon as she saw the messages on the screen, her stomach dropped. It wasn't the usual work emails or texts from his colleagues. It was a string of intimate, flirtatious messages exchanged between Ethan and someone named Sarah, someone she didn't recognize. The messages were graphic, the kind of conversation that no spouse should ever see. The heartache hit her like a punch to the gut. Ava felt the room spin around her. She sat down, unable to process what she was seeing. The messages weren't just casual exchanges. They were personal, filled with affection, longing, and promises. Ethan had been seeing Sarah behind her back. He had been unfaithful, and what hurt more was that he had hidden it from her. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was the realization that the man she had trusted with everything had been living a lie. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the messages, reading the words over and over. There was no denying it now. Ethan had been cheating. The perfect life they had built together, everything she had believed in, was nothing more than a facade. Ava felt numb, her heart breaking as she realized the depth of the deception. She had given Ethan everything, her love, her trust, her loyalty, and in return, he had given her nothing but lies. The pain of betrayal was sharper than anything she had ever felt. She couldn't understand how he could do this to her, how he could betray the love they had shared for so long. Her world was crumbling. Everything she thought she knew about their marriage was a lie. And now she had to decide what to do with the truth she had uncovered. The minutes dragged on as Ava sat there in stunned silence, staring at the phone in her hand. The words she had read were etched in her mind, each one more painful than the last. She had never imagined this day would come. It felt surreal, as if the universe was playing some cruel joke on her. But it was real. It was happening. And now she had to face the truth. Ava's mind was racing, but the emotions inside her were tangled in confusion and disbelief. How could Ethan do this to her? They had built a life together. They had made plans for the future. They had talked about having children, about growing old together. But now, all of that seemed so hollow. She felt as if the foundation of her entire world had been ripped out from under her, leaving nothing but empty space where trust had once stood. She couldn't just sit there forever. She had to confront him. But how? What could she say to someone who had betrayed her so deeply? Her thoughts were chaotic. There was anger, but it was mingled with a deep, aching sadness. She didn't know if she could look at him the same way again. Every moment they had shared, every laugh, every hug, every kiss, could it have been a lie? Could he have been pretending the entire time? Ava's fingers trembled as she typed a message to Ethan. I know about Sarah. Don't bother coming home today. She stared at the message before hitting send, her breath catching in her throat. The anger she felt was overwhelming. But so was the sorrow. How had things gotten this bad? How had she missed the signs? She had trusted him. She had given him everything, and he had thrown it all away. Ethan didn't respond immediately, and Ava didn't know whether she was relieved or terrified by that. Part of her wanted him to try to explain himself, to beg for forgiveness. But another part of her knew that no explanation could ever undo the pain he had caused. His silence was deafening, though, and Ava couldn't help but wonder if he had already moved on, if Sarah meant more to him than she did. Finally, hours later, Ethan arrived home. Ava was standing by the window, watching as he pulled into the driveway. The sight of him stirred up a storm of emotions, anger, hurt, and confusion, all crashing together inside her. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she knew it had to be said. The lies had to end. When Ethan walked through the door, he looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw Ava. He opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand to stop him. She didn't want to hear any excuses. She didn't want to hear how sorry he was or how much he regretted his actions. She had heard enough. Instead, she took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady but filled with pain. You've been lying to me, Ethan. For months. You've been seeing Sarah behind my back, Ava said, her voice trembling only slightly. How could you do this to me? How could you betray me like this? Ethan's face shifted from surprise to guilt, but he didn't speak at first. Ava wasn't sure if it was because he didn't know what to say, or if he was just ashamed. She could see it in his eyes. The regret, the guilt, the realization of what he had done. But it wasn't enough. She didn't want his apologies. She wanted the truth. I'm sorry, Ava, he said, his voice soft. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. I didn't want to hurt you. Ava shook her head. You didn't want to hurt me. You've been lying to me, Ethan. You've been hiding this whole affair. How could you say you didn't want to hurt me? The tears started to fall now, not in a dramatic outpouring, but slowly, as if they had been building up for a long time. She was angry, but she was also devastated. She had been loyal to him, had supported him through every challenge, and he had betrayed her. I don't want your apologies, Ava continued, her voice breaking slightly. I want to understand how you could do this to me. How did I become someone you could lie to? Someone you could cheat on? Ethan took a step forward, his hands outstretched in a gesture of remorse. Ava, Please. But Ava held up a hand, cutting him off. She didn't want to hear it anymore. There was nothing he could say to fix this. Nothing that would take away the sting of betrayal, the erosion of everything they had built together. "Don't touch me," she said quietly, her eyes locking with his. "You've broken my trust, and once that's gone, there's nothing left." She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if she would ever forgive him, or if she could ever look at him the same way. But one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. And she wasn't sure if she could live with the man who had destroyed everything they had. The following days were some of the hardest in Ava's life. The reality of what Ethan had done began to settle in, each hour dragging on as she tried to make sense of everything. Every part of her wanted to confront him, to make him explain why, how, and what had led him to this point. But deep down, she knew the truth. There were no real answers that would ever make sense of his betrayal. It was just something she would have to live with, something that would define her for as long as she allowed it. Ava had always been a person who cherished stability. She had loved the quiet comfort of her life with Ethan, the predictable routine they had shared, the trust that had bound them together. Now that stability had been shattered and she was left to pick up the pieces. She couldn't help but feel foolish. How had she missed the signs? She'd believed in their love so deeply, convinced herself that their life together was perfect, that nothing could tear them apart. But in a single moment, everything had changed. In the days that followed, Ethan continued to beg for her forgiveness. He sent flowers, wrote long apologies, and even showed up at her workplace, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way back into her heart. But Ava was firm. She couldn't forgive him, not yet, not after everything he had done. Her phone buzzed one evening, and she saw that it was a message from him. "Please, Ava," it read. "I'm truly sorry. I know I've hurt you, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I still love you. You're the only one I want." Ava sat there staring at the screen, the words sinking into her chest. He loved her? If he had truly loved her, how could he have betrayed her like this? How could he have thrown away their relationship for someone else? The questions echoed in her mind, but the answers remained elusive. She wasn't sure how long she sat there, but the weight of the message seemed to drain the energy from her. She had been so consumed by his betrayal that she hadn't really processed what this meant for her, what her future would look like without him. She had been so focused on the hurt he had caused that she hadn't allowed herself to truly grieve the loss of the life she thought they had. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. Not out of anger, but out of sheer sadness. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her husband. She was mourning the loss of trust, of the foundation on which her entire life had been built. The tears flowed freely, and as they did, something inside her shifted. For the first time since she had discovered the affair, she didn't feel so weighed down by the anger. It was still there, deep in her heart, but it was being replaced by something else, something she hadn't expected. Ava was beginning to realize that, while she had been hurt deeply, she was stronger than she thought. She didn't need Ethan to define her life. She didn't need him to feel whole. She had spent so many years being someone's wife, someone's partner, that she had forgotten who she was outside of that. She had been so focused on making their relationship work, on being the perfect wife, that she had neglected herself. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was allowing herself to focus on her own healing. The days turned into weeks, and the pain of betrayal didn't hurt as much. Ava still had moments when the memories would hit her, when the anger would flare up. But they were becoming fewer and farther between. She was starting to rebuild her life, one piece at a time. She spent more time with her friends, reconnecting with people she hadn't seen in years. She started taking yoga classes, something she had always wanted to do but had never made time for. The quiet moments she spent on her own, meditating and reflecting, allowed her to rediscover parts of herself that she had buried for so long. Slowly but surely, she was finding her way back to herself. One afternoon, as she sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ava realized that she was ready to make a decision. She couldn't go back to Ethan. The trust was gone. The love they once had been broken beyond repair. She had tried, but she couldn't continue in a marriage built on lies. She didn't need to wait for him to ask for forgiveness anymore. She had already forgiven him. She had forgiven him for her own sake so she could heal. But forgiveness didn't mean she had to stay. It didn't mean she had to return to a life of uncertainty and pain. Ava had learned the hard way that love wasn't about staying in a relationship that hurt you. It wasn't about tolerating betrayal or accepting lies. Love, real love, was about mutual respect, honesty, and trust. And those things, she realized, had to come from within. She was ready to move on, not because she had given up on love, but because she had finally learned to love herself. It was time for a new chapter. And while it was terrifying, Ava knew one thing. She was stronger than she had ever been, and that was enough. The weeks after Ava's decision were a mix of emotions. There were moments of clarity when she felt at peace with her choice, and then there were days when the loneliness crept back in. She missed the companionship she had with Ethan, the shared memories, and even the little things, like the way he used to make her coffee every morning. But none of that could outweigh the betrayal, the lies, and the empty promises he had given her. Ava spent time reflecting on their marriage, trying to understand how things had gone so wrong. She realized that she had put so much effort into making Ethan happy, into supporting his career, into being the perfect wife, that she had lost sight of who she was. She had let herself disappear in the process. And that realization was painful. But it was also liberating. She had spent years building a life for someone else, trying to please him, trying to be the perfect partner. And now, she had the chance to build her life for herself. She started focusing more on her personal goals, things she had always put off because she had been too focused on their life together. Ava enrolled in an art class, something she had always dreamed of doing. She began painting again, something that had once been a source of joy for her. Every brushstroke felt like a release, a way of reclaiming the parts of herself she had neglected for so long. It wasn't just about painting, it was about rediscovering her passions, reconnecting with the woman she had been before the betrayal. She also reconnected with her friends, many of whom she had distanced herself from while she was married. They had been supportive during the tough days, offering their shoulders to cry on and their ears to listen. But Ava had kept her distance, not wanting to burden them with her problems. Now she reached out to them, letting them back into her life. They were there for her when she needed them, offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional night out to let loose. It felt good to laugh again, to feel the support of people who cared about her without any strings attached. But even with all the progress she had made, there were still moments when she would think about Ethan. His face, his voice, the way he used to hold her, it all still lingered in the corners of her mind. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer consuming her. She was learning to live with it, to move forward despite it. She had come to understand that healing wasn't linear. There would be good days and bad days, but it was the way she chose to move forward that would determine her future. One afternoon, as Ava sat by the window, watching the rain fall gently outside, she had an epiphany. She realized that she had been waiting for closure from Ethan. She had been waiting for him to apologize, to beg for her forgiveness, to somehow make things right. But the truth was, she didn't need that closure anymore. She didn't need him to fix what he had broken. She had already begun to heal on her own. She didn't need him in her life to feel complete. She was complete already. The next day, she decided to write a letter to Ethan, not because she wanted him back, not because she needed closure, but because she needed to release the last of the anger and resentment she had been holding on to. She needed to let go of the last remnants of the relationship that had been broken beyond repair. In the letter, she told him everything she had been feeling, how much he had hurt her, how his betrayal had shaken her to the core, and how she had fought for their marriage even when it wasn't worth fighting for. She wrote about her journey of healing, about the strength she had found within herself, and how she was no longer dependent on him to define her happiness. She told him she had forgiven him, not for him, but for herself. Because holding on to the anger would only keep her stuck in the past, and she was ready to move on. She sealed the letter, but never sent it. Writing it was enough. It was her way of saying goodbye, of finally letting go of the emotional weight that had been holding her back. She didn't need to hear his response. She didn't need him to acknowledge the pain he had caused. She had taken the final step in her journey of healing. As she placed the letter in a drawer, Ava realized that she was finally free. Free from the emotional chains that had bound her to a man who had betrayed her. Free from the fear of moving forward. She had built a life for herself, and now she was in control of her own future. It was her time to live for herself, to pursue her own happiness, and to love herself fully, without anyone else's approval or validation. Ava's journey wasn't over, but it had taken a turn for the better. She had discovered her own strength, and that was more than enough. She was no longer a victim of betrayal. She was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her happiness, and her future, and that was something no one could ever take away from her. Months passed, and Ava continued to rebuild her life piece by piece. The anger that had once consumed her had started to fade, and in its place was a calm determination. She had gone through the darkest of days, but now she was learning to thrive in the light. Ava had spent so many years lost in her marriage to Ethan, trying to make him happy, trying to fix things that were never meant to be fixed. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was living for herself. She had found a new sense of freedom, a new sense of purpose. The scars from her past were still there, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned that healing didn't mean erasing the pain, it meant growing stronger because of it. Her job had become a source of fulfillment she hadn't anticipated. Ava had always enjoyed her career, but it had taken a back seat while she focused on her marriage. Now she was stepping into leadership roles, gaining respect from her colleagues, and excelling in ways she had never imagined. She was finally giving herself the credit she deserved, and it felt good. She was no longer defined by her relationship with Ethan. She was defined by her ability to succeed, to rise above the challenges she had faced. As the months went on, Ava's personal life also began to evolve. She had slowly started dating again, though at a pace that felt right for her. She wasn't looking for someone to fix her, to complete her. She had already learned that lesson the hard way. No, she was looking for someone who could stand beside her, someone who respected her independence, her strength, and her journey. It wasn't about finding love to fill a void. It was about sharing her life with someone who valued her for who she was. But there were still moments when Ava felt vulnerable. When she would hear a song that reminded her of Ethan, or when she would see a couple holding hands in the street and loneliness would creep in. It was natural. She had spent so many years with him, and those memories were etched into her heart. But Ava no longer allowed those moments to control her. She acknowledged the pain, allowed herself to feel it, and then moved forward. She knew that she was capable of loving again, if and when the time was right. One afternoon, she received a text from Ethan. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw his name on her screen. It had been months since they had last spoken, and she had moved on. She had even let go of the anger. But seeing his name made her pause. She hadn't expected this. She opened the message slowly, her mind racing with what it might say. "I've been thinking about you a lot," the message began. "I know I hurt you, and I regret everything I did. I've been trying to get my life back together, but I can't stop thinking about the life we had. I miss you, Ava. I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping we could talk. Just once. For closure, maybe." Ava sat still for a moment, processing his words. Closure. She had thought she needed closure once. She had thought that speaking to him one last time would somehow give her the peace she had been searching for. But the truth was, she didn't need closure from him anymore. She had already let go. She had already forgiven him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because she deserved peace. With a deep breath, Ava began typing her response. She thought carefully about what to say. She had learned that her words mattered. More than ever, they had to reflect the strength she had worked so hard to build. "I've moved on, Ethan," she typed. "I've learned to love myself, and I'm no longer holding on to the past. I don't need closure from you. I've already healed, and I'm stronger because of it. I hope you find the peace you're looking for, but I can't go back to what we had. It's over, and I'm okay with that." She hit send, the finality of her words sinking in. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was just done. She had said everything she needed to say, and now she was free. For the first time in a long time, she truly felt free. Ethan never replied, and that was the last time she heard from him. She had no regrets, no need for further explanations. She had already closed that chapter of her life, and she had done it on her terms. Ava continued to grow stronger each day, finding joy in the small moments, like laughing with her friends, enjoying her work, and embracing the quiet nights she now spent alone, comfortable in her own company. She wasn't afraid of the future anymore. She was ready for whatever came next. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. Ava had learned that healing came from within, that strength came from accepting your scars, and that love, true love, begins with loving yourself first. She was ready for the next chapter, and whatever it held, she knew she would face it with her head held high and her heart open.